Serious academics have comprehensively debunked critical race theory, yet this does not stop the BBC promoting it. It's just emerged that last month the BBC published an explanation of the controversial idea of white privilege deriving from critical race theory, once defined by the business secretary Kemi Badenoch as an ideology that sees blackness as victimhood and whiteness as oppression. It included all sorts of ideological-driven points, such as that disparities can exclusively be explained by racism, or that readers ought to promise to listen and to amplify the voices of people of colour. It also cited an expert in black studies who has previously accused the late Queen Elizabeth II of being a symbol of white supremacy and compared Churchill to Hitler. Well, joining me now is one of the organisers of Black Lives Matter's protest in 2020, Imarn Ayton. Well, thank you very much for joining me. Do you think the BBC should be promoting this in an educational setting or should be more balanced?
I think it's a tricky line to kind of follow, but I think they're doing a decent job in terms of impartiality and in terms of educating people. I think they highlighted an article and it's for the audience to decide as to what they think.
And that's important. It's putting two sides of the argument, isn't it? That it's perfectly reasonable in an education setting to say there are some people who think this, but if you're doing an educational programme, you need to have the second part of the argument and explain why there are difficulties with this particular view.
Yes, I do agree, but I think when we think back to the term white privilege, let's just be clear, just to add that context, it means, put simply, that white people do not have to contend with overt, covert and, most importantly, institutionalised racism in the same way that black people do. So I think when we talk about white privilege, as much as it may be offensive, I know, I think it's about honesty and stating the obvious.
Nothing's offensive. It's always right to encourage freedom of speech.
Good, I agree.
The question here in the United States we've got on white privilege, where this theory came from, is how amazingly well American Asians do, and that they have been discriminated against. The Chinese Americans had a terrible time in the early 20th century. Japanese Americans were interned, and yet, on all the statistics, they do better than white people in America. So how have they managed to overcome this?
I think you should probably speak to those from the Asian community if you would like to address their issues and the way in which they've dealt with said issues. For me, personally, I can talk about racism as a whole, right? And so if we talk about the fact that we have racism in this country, we used racism to basically transition to slavery, and then slavery to colonialism, and then colonialism to neo-colonialism. So for us, in terms of black people, our history is very specific, right? We had Elizabeth I to William IV over a 270-year period. Every monarch has basically advocated and supported the enslavement and colonisation of African people. So this is why our history is very unique, it's very different, and we cannot compare it to Asian people. It's very specific.
But that's not right, that, first of all, it was Britain, the United Kingdom, that was the first country in the world to abolish slavery. Nobody else was abolishing slavery, and that the slaves, the African slaves, were being traded by Africans long before the British were involved.
Yes, 100%. I'm not going to negate any of those points. But what I will say is the fact that we are still dealing with racism in this country 400 years later. And that is the point that I think we should be still dealing with and trying to grapple with at this point.
But
not necessarily
OK, but doesn't this make the success of the Asian community in the United States so startling? I mean, some of the figures, Asian Americans...
You're talking about the United States,
the United
right?
States.
Okay.
But the United States has more of a problem than we do, I think. It's more of an issue in the United States.
No, I think overt racism is more of an issue, not covert racism. Covert racism is subtle racism, and I think that's more of an issue.
OK, I mean, I actually think this country has a very good record, but most of these theories come from the US, and the US therefore relevant.
They come from just facts.
Well, critical race theory comes from the US.
So if you're talking about specifically critical race theory, then no problem.
But Asian Americans make up 6% of the population and get 60% of the top scores in the SAT test, the American educational tests. Amazing figure on the Vietnamese population in the United States. Only 1/3 proficient in English, and yet, overall, they have higher incomes than US-born households. This is an amazing success story. And don't you think Kemi Badenoch's point is really important, that taking on victimhood actually holds people back? People need to take the careers that they've got now, the lives they've got now, not look back on things that happened 400 years ago and say, that's why my life is difficult.
So I agree with you to an extent. I think we're talking about two kind of issues that have been amalgamated. So we're talking about personal development and growth for the individual, and then we are talking about societal issues, right? So social injustices in terms of a community aspect of things and in terms of a nation. These are two separate things. So in terms of victimhood, I agree on an individualistic perspective, it's not ideal, right? We should probably be far more positive. But when we talk about the nation and social issues, we have to be leading with pragmatism and matter of fact. And it is a fact that black people are 7 times more likely to be stopped and searched, 7 times more likely to die at the hands of police after being restrained, 5 times more likely to have force used against them. The list goes on. So I think we need to be dealing with personal development, which is one thing, and then social injustices, which is another. And in terms of your point about Asian and etc., I will actually agree with you. Okay. I think what you're inferring is that there is an issue with culture and the way in which people deal with things individualistically and within their individual communities. So what I'm going to say is I do believe that culture has a role to play. However, racism also has a role to play.
OK, but the culture in the UK, very importantly, has always focused on the individual. And this is why you go...
No, it hasn't. No, it hasn't.
Oh, but it has. That's
Jacob, I do apologise.
OK.
Please.
No, you're allowed to
interrupt. You can see the passion.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you. I just have to just dispute on that point, because I do believe there are 4 kind of processes in terms of a human being. First, individualism. Second, community. Third, nation and our country. Fourth, the world. And what happens is with the Conservative Party, with all due respect, we try to kind of forget about the individualism in terms of personal development. We forget about the community, which is in terms of what is necessary and what we need for black communities to thrive, what we need for Asian communities to thrive, and we go straight to the nation, which is British.
No, I don't agree with that.
I don't
agree with that. You start with the individual. You start with the basis we start with the base as a Conservative. We start with society being built by the individual to community to the nation.
So we do agree.
And it's why it's so fundamentally important that the Macclesfield judgment, which said there was no slavery, the Mansfield judgment, sorry, said there was no slavery in the United Kingdom, no concept of it, emphasises the fact that individuals have rights and they are free. And from that comes their opportunity to make their lives. And that's what we should be supporting as politicians, rather than saying that people are in particular communities with grievances. I think that holds society back.
No, I disagree. I think it ensures that we are not leading with empathy. And I think when I think about the Conservative Party, I always think of pragmatism, which is awesome. But I think in order for us to be the best individuals, the best community, the best nation, and the best type of world that we want, we need pragmatism and emotion. And emotion is centred around empathy and understanding the plight and the issues within people's lives, right? Individuals and the different issues that they go through, as well as the community issues. And so what I'm trying to explain to you, Jacob, is I agree with you to an extent. I believe that... I'll give you an example. I'm just going to make it really personal. I got my nails done today. And this lovely Chinese lady, she works 7 days a week. 7 days a week to ensure that she can do my nails 7 days a week. That's a really important thing within Chinese culture. They will work and they will ensure that they can do whatever they can to ensure that they have a decent life, they can provide for their family, etc. So I'm not going to sit here and say culture is not an issue. I'm in agreement with you, sir. Culture is an issue, but Jacob, racism is an issue as well.
That we've expected. Thank you so much for coming on, and thank you.